Um, this sutta, the Khajjaniya Sutta, is a sutta that's directly on the five clinging aggregates. But as I always say, everything the Buddha taught was in the context of dependent origination. And his first sutta on the Four Noble Truths, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. The dependent origination states that from ignorance of Four Noble Truths come, as a requisite condition, come fabrications. From fabrications comes consciousness, ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths, et cetera, those 12 causative links resulting in the Buddha's words, all manner of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing unsatisfying and disappointing experiences. In a word, dukkha or suffering. So from ignorance of Four Noble Truths, the result is this confused, deluded way of looking at ourselves in relation to the world around us. The Buddha taught the three marks of existence as a way of describing the results of that ignorance, meaning that we misunderstand the impermanence of all things in relation to this fabricated or misunderstanding of what constitutes a self rooted in that initial ignorance. Is that clear? So the five clinging aggregates relate in different ways to a lot of primary teachings, but in this context, the five clinging aggregates are the personal experience of our own fabrications, rooted in what? Rooted in ignorance. So in essence, and again, in relation to the Buddhist teaching, that's all that we're concerned about. We can take these a little bit too far and get distracted by that. This is really the essence of the Buddhist teaching, is we don't know who we are. And the Buddha used the term in a very brilliant way, five clinging aggregates, to describe what we've created out of a fabricated view of reality. But also understand that we've created it in the reality that we're fabricating. Is that confusing what I just said? We're using the sum and substance of our own environment, but from a misunderstanding, we've created something that is fabricated or corrupted. Tanasara uses the word sometimes perverted. It's simply rooted in ignorance of the way things truly are. And so if you think about that, anything that results from a life experience that is based on a misunderstanding of who and what we are in relation to the world around us, there has to be stress, there has to be suffering, there has to be confusion and ongoing deluded thinking, because now we fabricated a view of ourselves that we insist is real. And most of us spend our entire lives promoting and defending this false view, five clinging aggregates. Is that clear? Okay. And it really is a basic teaching of the Buddha. Again, getting back to these insight into the three marks of existence. On one occasion, the Buddha was staying at Savatthi. There he addressed those gathered. Friends, any Dhamma practitioner who directs their thinking to past lives are only recollecting one or all of the five clinging aggregates. The Buddha starting this sutta off with something that was very common during his time and very common in modern Buddhism. It's carried through all these 2,600 years. In fact, for many of my beginning years in modern Buddhism, I was taught that one of the ways you know that you're awakening and developing the right Buddhism is that you have this clear recollection, and it's often put this way, of your manifold past lives, meaning you remember an infinite number of past lives. That was common during the Buddhist time too, and it came out of the teachings, it came out of the Veda and the Vedas and the Upanishads, the modern precursor to modern Hinduism, that the Buddha studied and rejected. If you remember I can't think of the name of the sutta, on noble and ignoble searches, the Buddha described studying with those types of teachers and rejecting them out of hand because it didn't get to the goal. It was just more distraction. And part of that was recollecting these past lives. And it's something that has been prevalent. Again, it's in modern Buddhism, but it was prevalent during the Buddhist time. So he's speaking to this a little bit broader understanding of creating speculative or suppositional identities in realms that have no basis in reality. In other words, we've already fabricated this self in this physical plane that we live in, where we actually are. And our practice, our spiritual practice, with quotes, has now taken us to create a self in suppositional, imaginary, non-physical realms. Because this one is unsatisfying. And it was common during the Buddhist time, and it's almost a compulsive, common way of most spiritual practices today. Let me establish myself in some future way. And we went through the teachings on how we start directing our thoughts. Hold on, somebody wants to join. I gotta find a better way to do this. Admit. There's Mary. Hi, Mary. And so anytime we try to do that, establish the self in any way, whether it's through the idea that I am the world's greatest baker, or I am going to be the world's greatest baker, or the world's greatest meditator, or the most peaceful person at some point in the future, if I just do these things, that's all speculative. It's all an external application of self. And so even this idea of who and what I was in past lives, even if it was possible to actually recollect that, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it's simply a distraction. It's just as much of a distraction as thinking about what happened to me yesterday. Why? Because I'm not here. And what might I do to influence my future? And it doesn't mean all of us, if we don't pay the mortgage, we're going to be living on the street. That's not what we're talking about. It's speculative applications of who I'm going to be if I do certain things right now. That's all part of I making, and it's all rooted in this fabricated view of self. Clear? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's okay to say no. Mm-hmm. It can be the difficulty in understanding this is because, and I have this in the introduction here, a mind rooted in ignorance will create very powerful but subtle strategies to ignore its own ignorance, meaning to ignore the fabrications that we've made. And that's really the difficulty in seeing this veil of ignorance that we've created in ourselves. That's what the Buddha's teaching here. I'm going to skip over some of my commentary. Well, let me go back, because now that I talk so much, we lost the context. Friends, any Dhamma practitioner who directs their thinking to past lives are only recollecting one or all of the 5 clinging aggregates. The 5 clinging aggregates are form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and consciousness. But remember, it's consciousness rooted in ignorance, ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance. Which 5, the Buddha asks? When recollecting, I was one with such a form in the past, one is only recollecting form. What does the Buddha mean? It almost sounds a little bit like double talk, doesn't it? When one is self-identifying with a form that I had yesterday, or in the past life when I was the King of England, or playing center field for the Yankees, one of my favorites, just because you self-identify with it doesn't change the fact that it's just form. It's just ordinary. Remember in the Sattva-Vipassana Sutta, the Buddha says a person is made up of these 6 impersonal qualities, completely impersonal and completely ordinary. And if you take those properties as the foundation, it's in that foundation that we're now creating an imaginary, speculative experience of life. All right? When you're recollecting, I was one with such a form in the past, one is only recollecting form, not something special or extraordinary or even related to something of a permanent individual self. It's just a form, just like any other form. When recollecting, I was one with such a feeling in the past, one is only recollecting feeling. So no matter how hard we want to own our feelings, we can't. They're just feelings. And we're using the feelings. And Catherine, some of this might be a little bit out of context simply because you haven't been studying with us long. And I'll help you with that at the end of class. But the Buddha's referring to how we identify with our feelings and create identities. And a good example of that is we have a rough day and somebody says, how you doing? You say, well, I had a rough day. Well, you're identifying with a feeling that is permanent. The roughness of the day has already passed. It's not who you are now unless you hold on to it, an aspect of mindfulness. When recollecting, I was one with such a feeling in the past, one is only recollecting feeling. There's no self there. When recollecting, I was one with such perceptions in the past, one is only recollecting perceptions. Again, this isn't just past lives from a million years ago. It's past life experience from a moment ago. And if I'm carrying that into this present moment and that perception, that feeling, that self-identification with form is rooted in fabrication, what am I giving birth to in this moment? Simply another fabricated view. When I can recognize, excuse me, and depersonalize or recognize the impersonal nature of all past experiences, and in fact, all present experiences, then I'm not pulling that fabricated view along with me, and I can see things as they really are. It's just feeling. It's not a feeling that I'm using to define myself. And in this moment, and in relation to this perception that I have right now is just a perception. It's not a special perception because I have it. I don't have to defend this perception. And again, if I have to remind myself, we talked a little bit about this earlier in class, at the point of contact is where we practice the Dhamma, isn't it? And even if my perception in this moment is creating stress because of the fabricated nature of it, the Dhamma practice gives us a framework to recognize that. And that's exactly how we progress towards awakening. We recognize that in this moment, the perception is causing stress because of ignorance of Four Noble Truths and a fabricated view. When recollecting I was one with such fabrications in the past, one is only recollecting fabrications. So no matter what we think of ourselves, whatever imagine, and I should tell you that I've had what I consider induced experiences of past lives. And I say that induced because I had a teacher one time who was very well trained in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and was also a trained hypnotist, which kind of goes along. And I'm not putting down that whole type of, I don't even know how to, that whole philosophy, I guess, is the best way to describe it. But it's a way of talking to someone that directly repatterns the way they think. And anyway, so I had experiences like this that were induced, and I've had some in meditation for years and years. In fact, when I first started meditating, I would get this vision of of a nice, pleasant little monk meditating. And the vision was, well, I've done this for many, many millions of years. I've been this, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But when you think about someone just starting out in meditation, it's a nice view to have of yourself, isn't it? To create. I've been doing this forever. It's a fabricated view, even if somehow it's true, because my thinking right now is fabricated. My perception of that view is fabricated. So what am I seeing? It's just a fabrication. Do you see how that relates to this? If it's a fabricated view, no matter how I apply it or attach it to or cling it to, past, present, or future, it's fabricated. It's only fabricated. So the Buddha's teaching this in the context of speculative establishments to simply see them as just that. They're all fabricated. When recollecting I was one with such a consciousness in the past, one is only recollecting consciousness. If that consciousness is rooted in ignorance, it's simply ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance. There's nothing special, extraordinary, worth clinging to or worth continuing to establish in our own minds. Why is the form aggregate called form? Because it's afflicted. Excuse me. In the context, we're using the word form to describe something that is afflicted because it's rooted in a fabrication. That's why we're calling it a form aggregate. It's one of these five aggregates that make up our experience, our view of a person, but the view is rooted in fabrications. Because it is afflicted. Form is afflicted with cold, heat, hunger, thirst, wind, sun, bugs, and reptiles. You could go on and on, but but that's enough. Because I'm taking this personal. When a swarm of mosquitoes is about my head, I take that personal too. Why are they around me and not you? Or why are they chasing me around? Why is it another cold day? Or why is it another rainy day? I have a friend of mine, a pretty good friend, that days like this it drives them crazy. They just can't stand rainy days for whatever, forget about getting back into the psychology of where it came from. But it's because they're taking it personal. I can't take another rainy day. Well, if you want a calm and peaceful mind, you shouldn't even notice it. It's just, it's just rain. It's just a fabrication. But because of self-identification, form is afflicted. I'm afflicted because I've associated myself with this form. I've created the suffering. Clear? The second arrow. If I can let go of that self-identification with form, then the bugs and the reptiles and the wind and the rain and et cetera don't bother me. My environment is no longer a concern because it's not me anymore. It's such a profound insight into the 3 marks of existence. Why is the feeling aggregate called feeling? Because it feels. It just fits right in. It feels pleasure, pain, and neither pleasure nor pain. Those are the 3 experiences that we can have, by the way. We either experience life as pleasure, pain, or this ambiguous neither pleasure nor pain, which usually is experienced as boredom. It's one of the reasons, most difficult reasons, that we stop meditating, because it's just so damn boring. But if it's boring, it's because we don't have the right context. Why is a perception aggregate called perception? Because it perceives. It perceives blue, yellow, red, and white. Again, the Buddha is just talking about the perceptions aren't only related to color, but they're related to preferential choices made from a view that is fabricated. And then we create further identities. I like chocolate, but I don't like blueberries or whatever. Why is the fabrication aggregate called fabrication? Why is it? Why is the fabrication aggregate called fabrication?
I was thinking about because it's fabricated.
Hey, because it fabricates. What else could it do? What else could it do? That's what keeps us in ignorance, isn't it? It's a fabricated view of self is compelled to continue to fabricate. That's how it continues itself. And so a mind that is rooted in ignorance can only fabricate another moment rooted in ignorance. A mind that is beginning to become refined in its mindfulness, meaning holding in mind the Eightfold Path, can now give birth to a moment that is prone towards awakening and letting go of those fabricated views. Thank you, Jen.
But John?
Yes.
Isn't the fabricated mental fabrication, isn't it just a sum of the form, feeling, and perception? Because if you say form, feeling, perception, that's all the fabrication, and you understand that is, they are the fabrication.
Yes.
And then underneath, we've got mental fabrications.
Yes, it's both the experience of it and the causative action for it. In other words, we wouldn't have a corrupted view of form if it wasn't for fabrications. But fabrications are a part of that. Much like the earth, wind, fire, liquid, space, and consciousness, the 6 properties are the foundation of form, the form property. Do you see that? And so while those are impersonal, now because of wrong views, we've created a personal experience out of something that is completely impersonal because it's fabricated. And so it's almost like the feedback loop. It is a feedback loop that the Buddha describes in the Gara Sutta. Because of ignorance of Four Noble Truths, we create a fabricated view, and that fabricated view is compelled to continue to fabricate. So it's both the causative action and a result of the action. What a great question, and needed for clarity. And then this last, the aspect of consciousness relates directly to dependent origination and all the other references to thinking rooted in ignorance. So it takes a wrong view of self rooted in consciousness to further that type of thinking that is fabricated. It's all part of this one ignorant package that we create because we don't know. We literally don't. That's why ignorance is the right word. The Buddha is not saying that human beings are all a bunch of ignorant fools. In relation to what he's teaching, Four Noble Truths, we are ignorant of it. And by developing and understanding a profound wisdom of Four Noble Truths, we free ourselves from those wrong views and live a life of calm and peace within and without. And that's why I say the most loving thing I can do for myself and for every other sentient being is to take to the Dhamma and awaken, because I end the conflict within myself and I no longer will contribute to the conflict in the world. And it's just that way. Why? Because I've let go of all fabricated views. Thank you. I got to go back one now. Why is the fabrication aggregate called fabrication? Because it fabricates. It fabricates what is experienced as form, feeling, perceptions, and consciousness. It fabricates fabrications. It's an ongoing problem, isn't it? And again, it goes back to why the Buddha taught an Eightfold Path. upon his awakening, he considered, is it even possible to teach this, knowing what he knows about the problem of ignorance and a mind that is rooted in ignorance to create these very powerful and subtle strategies to ignore its own ignorance. How do I pierce that veil of ignorance? You need some frame of reference. That's the refined mindfulness that the Buddha taught. That is the Eightfold Path, to recognize and abandon fabrications rooted in ignorance. It fabricates fabrications. Why is the consciousness aggregate? I just skipped over some commentary. That's all I was doing. Why is a consciousness aggregate called consciousness? Because it cognizes. It cognizes sour, sweet, bitter, pungent, salty, and bland. Again, the consciousness, the vehicle that we're using to live in the world and interact with the world, makes discriminations between things that it likes and doesn't like. Take that back to where we started. If it's making discriminatory choices about likes and dislikes, or what it's ambiguous about, and those choices are rooted in ignorance of what's really occurring, what is it going to manifest in its own life? Ongoing, disappointing, and unsatisfactory experiences. Ongoing conflict within itself. And that can manifest in any way, and we see how it does in the world today. Friends, a well-instructed Dhamma practitioner understands, I am now being afflicted by form. In the past, I was afflicted by form. If I delight in future form, I will likewise be afflicted with future form. The whole idea of creating a better self from whatever practice I might be. In modern Buddhism, it might be the most prevalent and well-populated form of modern Buddhism is based almost entirely on a single chant. And the idea is that if I keep this chant on my lips continually, and most importantly, when I die, I will be immediately transported to a Buddhist heaven, Tulsita heaven, and there and forevermore I'll be taken care of by Abhidhamma Buddha. I'm not putting that down. It may be entirely true that that's possible, but it's speculative, it's suppositional, it's rooted in continuing to establish a self in that future reward. Much religion does the same thing, and it takes me out of what's occurring right now, doesn't it? And it's something that the Buddha realized does not get to the heart of the matter, is why am I confused and deluded and suffering right now? And what can I do about it? He taught an eightfold path to awaken right now and gain the benefits of that awakening right here, right now, not in some speculative notion or a future form. And so if I delight, if I'm doing something, whatever it might be, even attending this class with the idea that if I do enough of this, that when I die, I'll get something that's really worthwhile, you're missing the whole point. Because the Buddha's Dhamma teaches us that awakening occurs right now by letting go of all views rooted in ignorance. It has nothing to do with gaining merit or what I might become by doing some good things or some good behavior. You know, just as another example, the Tibetan religion Buddhist religion that I took my vows in, since denounced, teaches that your Dhamma practice can only really begin in earnest after you do 108,000 complete full prostrations, which is from a standing position. You go lay down, put your head on the ground, touch the ground, stand up. And again, I respect it as a religion. I tried that for about 8 minutes. I think I got to 14, and I said, no, but I realized that there's no possible way that an awakened human being could have taught that simply doing any type of exercise, whether it's that or bicycling 20 miles a day, could change the way that I'm thinking. How could it? And I had it in at least an innate understanding that the problem wasn't outside of what I might become. The problem was the way I'm thinking right now. And I didn't address that. I didn't find a vehicle to address that until I actually studied what the Buddha taught. Skip over a little bit. Understanding, they become understanding the foolishness of speculative self-establishment. Understanding, they become disenchanted with past and future form. So if we're disenchanted with it, if we understand the foolishness of projecting our thoughts to the past or to the future, we are now disenchanted. The Buddha is encouraging us not to do that, not to engage in a practice that in many religions, including not just Buddhist religions, recollecting past lives is seen as something that we should be doing, and as a benchmark of a right Dhamma practice. The Buddha is saying, get out of the past and get out of the future. They become disenchanted with past and future form. They are now practicing the Dhamma to become disenchanted and dispassionate with present form. One of the most profound statements the Buddha's ever made. This is why we practice the Dhamma. When we can get our head out of the past and out of the future, we can then start integrating the Dhamma and practicing it from right view, from what's occurring right now. Because the only possible change that can occur in a world, a universe, a cosmos that is prone to change, the only internal profound change that we can make can only occur right now in the present moment. Why? Look at this sutta. I can't change anything in the past, can I? No matter how much I'd like to. And even though I think I can, through speculative thinking, I think I can change who I might be in the future, we see that all as just eye-making right now, isn't it? It's a mind disjoined from its body. If I do this enough, right now, after I die, I'm going to be happy. Well, where's my thinking? Where's my mind? It's not here, is it? It's in that wonderful place of 24-hour chocolate cake.
No calories.
Yeah, with no calories. Forever young, with good eyesight. And so as pleasant as that might be, because what we do it because it allows me in this moment when I'm feeling, when I'm full of self-loathing because I'm just not good enough now, well, that makes me feel better, doesn't it? And if I keep doing this or whatever it might be, I'm good. I can deal with I can deal with what I am right now by not dealing with it. I can project my mind out of my body into the future or into the past. That again, it's the essence of what the Buddha is teaching. It's the essence of right meditation. To unite a mind in its body and be able to be present with what's occurring without the need for approval. And to develop radical acceptance. Why? Because it's simply what's occurring. That's the Eightfold Path. That's what it does. They are now practicing the Dhamma to develop cessation from clinging to present form. We're past now. We've developed the Dhamma enough, and this doesn't take all that long, from establishing ourselves in the past or the future, and now I can start dealing with the real issue, clinging to what I am right now. And how do we do it? Through continued right effort. I'll skip over that too. Furthermore, this well-instructed, again, I'm just skipping over some commentary. I'm filling that in rather nicely without it. Furthermore, this well-instructed Dhamma practitioner understands, I am now being afflicted by feelings, by perceptions, by fabrications, and by consciousness. We know what we're doing to ourselves. We understand the second arrow. In the past, I was also afflicted by feelings, by perceptions, by fabrications, and by consciousness. And if I delight in future feelings, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness, I will likewise be afflicted with those in the future. Simple, isn't it? If I continue to speculate and place myself outside of my body in speculative realms, whatever that might be, I'm continuing the affliction of fabrication. So I use a meditation practice that is solely designed to deepen concentration so that well-concentrated mind can hold the refined mindfulness of what's occurring right now and see it from the point of view of the 8 factors of the Eightfold Path. Excuse me. And those simple directions there of right view, right intention, right speech, action, livelihood, and the right refined mindfulness, that 7th factor of the Eightfold Path, is continued through right effort, which is holding in mind, when the Buddha teaches right effort, it's holding in mind the factors of right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right intention. That's how we know. We all know what those are: speech, action, livelihood, right speech, skillful speech, another way of saying it. appropriate speech, appropriate action, appropriate livelihood. And if we're practicing restraint as life occurs at the sixth sense base, we're able to apply that. And if we find ourselves reacting and engaging in unskillful speech, action, or livelihood, we're able to recognize it, not excuse it away, not say, well, I know that I'm not acting appropriately right now, but I'll try better in the future. You see what you just did? You jumped from the past and a disappointing experience of yourself in the past, even if it was 5 minutes ago, and you're now in the future. And why does that work so well? Because I don't have to deal with it. So again, this is not some grand mystical teaching, except it's the grandest, most mystical teaching of all time, because it doesn't take us out of what's occurring. In fact, I think the reason why most people have such great difficulty with this, at least those that try it and give up, because they cannot deal with now. They literally can't deal with what's actually occurring now. It's too, there's not enough distraction in it. And so let me try something else. And as far as modern Buddhism, let me start a chanting practice or a physical ritual practice or a poetry practice and call it whatever, or do walking meditation. It's one of the great, there's more people that practice walking meditation by far, by millions and millions, that actually meditate. Why? Because it's convenient. The Buddha taught meditation to be, in the four foundations of mindfulness, it's established first by being mindful of the breath in the body, not to be mindful of the feet at the end of my body. There's no concentration there. Literally, but again, I don't want this to sound like a rant. It's not. But it should be recognized that that is an external application that takes your mind out of having to deal with who you are. And why wouldn't we want to? I mean, the most profound and meaningful thing that I discovered by actually reading what the Buddha taught is that I can address myself. And in the vernacular that I grew up in the 60s and 70s, I can find myself. But all the other times I was looking outside, and we're not out there. We're right here. We only exist now, but it has to be with a mind that can recognize and hold in mind what's occurring. And when we get caught up in any type of speculative existence, we lose it, including the idea that I'm going to better myself. That doesn't mean that we don't engage in a practice that develops awakening. But as we start fine-tuning that thinking, we realize that the only change that I'm making is not now and not in the future. It's the only change we can make. Understanding, they become disenchanted with past and future feelings, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness. Again, in relation to the five clinging aggregates, we become disenchanted with this fabricated view of self. They are now practicing the Dhamma to become disenchanted and dispassionate with present feelings, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness. We're doing it right. They are now practicing the Dhamma to develop cessation from clinging to present feelings, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness. What do you think, friends? Is form present or impermanent? Is form permanent or impermanent? Are feelings, perceptions, fabrications, consciousness permanent or impermanent? They answer, great teacher, they are all impermanent. And is that which is impermanent easeful or stressful? They respond, what is impermanent is always stressful, great teacher. Friends, is it fitting to self-identify with what is impermanent and stressful, always subject to change and uncertainty, as this is me, this is mine, this is what I am? Great teacher, it is not fitting to self-identify with what is impermanent and stressful, always subject to change and uncertainty, as this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. Friends, it is known by the wise that any form whatsoever that is past, present, or future, any form that is internal or external, remember in last week's sutta, the internal or external is the same. It's the same form. The external is the external projection of the self. Internal, external, any form that is obvious or subtle, any form that is common or sublime, any form near or far, should always be seen through right view, as this is not me, this is not mine, this is not what I am. any form, past, present, or future. Now we've gotten our minds out of the past and the future. This form now we can deal with. And remember it from the point of view of the 6 properties, the 4: earth, wind, fire, liquid, space, and consciousness. Those are the 6 properties that define a person. They're all impersonal. Remember in relation to that, rather than the common view of seeing ourselves as these 5 clinging aggregates, something that is fabricated, rooted in ignorance. And it's just that clear. The 6 properties describe a person in reality. The 5 clinging aggregates do not. Furthermore, any feelings, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness whatsoever, past, present, or future, internal or external, obvious or subtle, common or sublime, near or far, and all of those, the reference here to obvious or subtle, etc., is in reference to internal, external. No matter how we're carrying our view of ourselves, whether it's past or future in some speculative mystical realm or not, they're all always should be seen through right view as this is not me, this is not mine, this is not what I am. This, friends, is called a Dhamma practitioner who diminishes rather than embellishes. Look at the reference and the power in that. A self-referential ego self is always, moment by moment, thought by thought, compulsively embellishing itself and establishing itself in every thought, word, and idea that occurs. Whether we recognize it or not, that's what a mind does. That's what a mind rooted in ignorance does. It doesn't mean that we can't function doing that. We all function pretty well. But because we're living from a fabricated view, we're embellishing the Buddha's teaching to recognize what's occurring right now and diminish the I-making. Go back to that. This, friends, is called a Dhamma practitioner who diminishes rather than embellishes, who abandons rather than clings. Abandon what? Abandon fabricated views rather than clinging to those views. Discards rather than acquires. Let me do a million of these types of things and I'll be okay in the future. I discard that and put it aside rather than looking to add more to myself. What are you adding? You're only adding to a fabricated view. Who scatters and does not pile up. So what is it? I mean, think of the visual there. Scattering your view of yourself rather than this confining way of building yourself up into this gigantic world-beating whatever you might be. Let it go. Let it scatter because there's nothing there. It's only suffering. It's only ignorance. The Buddha continues, the wise Dhamma practitioner diminishes form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness, rather than embellish these aggregates. The wise Dhamma practitioner abandons. Let me go back to that. So look at that common saying. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but the idea that we can build up all our toys, and the one at the end, that's the saying. Whoever has the most toys at the end wins. You know, and the next step past that is once it's over, there's no more toys. But that's what a self-referential ego self does, not necessarily only objects, but whatever it might be. It might be power, it might be notoriety. But we're always looking to add, to embellish this thing, to pile up our stuff, rather than abandon it. And again, it doesn't mean that we give up our homes and go live under a bridge somewhere. It simply means we're no longer attached to it and defining ourselves by external sources. And what we say is mine, me. Look at me. Look at what I have. Look at all the chocolate cake I got. I can't remember who it was. Helen. She gave me some good chocolate cake next week. I was attached to it for a while, and impermanence was gone. Rather than embellish these aggregates. The wise Dhamma practitioner abandons form, feelings, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness, rather than cling to these aggregates. The wise Dhamma practitioner discards form, feelings, perceptions, fabrications, and consciousness, rather than acquire these aggregates. The wise Dhamma practitioner scatters form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, consciousness, rather than piling up these aggregates. Understanding impermanence with regards to these aggregates, the well-instructed Dhamma practitioner grows disenchanted with form, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with perceptions, they grow disenchanted with consciousness. Excuse me. And that's obviously these words are translated from the Pali, but it's the perfect word in translation is disenchanted rather than enchanted. Enchanted, it also has a connotation of being mesmerized, almost hypnotized by it, because I'm so enchanted with this view of myself. Becoming disenchanted, it depersonalizes it. We allow ourselves to see things clearly as we truly are when we become disenchanted with seeing ourselves from fabricated view. Disenchanted, they become dispassionate. With dispassion established, there is release from clinging to wrong views, ignorant of Four Noble Truths. Release, they now know they are released. That's how we know. Again, this relates to how the Dhamma is often presented, that you'll know you're awakened when you can recognize your past lives. The Buddha says you know you're awakened when you know you're awakened, when you know you've released yourself. You'll know it. They know that birth is ended, and that's an important, it relates to karma and rebirth and the true teaching on what that means. It simply means that there's nothing left that could fabricate another moment, give birth to another moment rooted in ignorance. Birth is ended, a life well integrated with the heartwood, meaning the Eightfold Path, has been fulfilled. The task is complete. We're done. And we know it. We're awakened. They know that there will be no further entanglements with the world. With this, friends, is a Dhamma practitioner who neither diminishes nor embellishes form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, consciousness, but who is now established in the Dhamma, having abandoned identifying with these aggregates. This, friends, is a Dhamma practitioner who neither clings to nor abandons form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness, but who is now established in the Dhamma, having abandoned these aggregates. In other words, we're done. We're now done with even the process of recognition and abandoning, because we've completely abandoned them. We've let them all go. This, friends, is a Dhamma practitioner who neither acquires nor discards form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness, but who is now established in the Dhamma, having discarded these aggregates. This, friends, is a Dhamma practitioner who neither piles up nor scatters form, feeling, perceptions, fabrications, or consciousness, but who is now established in the Dhamma, having scattered these aggregates. Friends, I declare, it is from diminishing, abandoning, discarding, and scattering these aggregates that one is established in the Dhamma, a wise Dhamma practitioner, free of affliction. Friends, one who has released their mind from all wrong views is never afflicted again by speculation. This one is established in right view. Thank you. Let me invite our friends to speak with us if they can.
Never afflicted again by speculation. That would be so glorious. Right, I thought.
Hi, Mary. Hi, David. I've unmuted your mics. Yeah, and that's it. It's really it's simple though, isn't it? When we know how to frame this teaching correctly, it's not beyond our means, is it? It's just a matter of doing it. It's a matter of continuing with practice. I think maybe we can talk about that. Mary, hello. How are you? Do you want to say anything or ask any questions or tell us how you're doing? Can you hear me? Maybe not.
Hi, John. I can hear you.
Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good. I'm so glad you could join us, and David joined us too. Do you have any questions or comments on today's sutta?
No, I didn't get a chance to read it ahead of time, so I'm going to do that today. So I think I'll just take noble silence.
Great. I'm so glad you could join us. And I'm going to teach the same sutta Tuesday, so I hope I see
Oh,
you.
good. I'll be there Tuesday night.
Great. David, how are you?
Good morning, John. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so glad you could join us. I got your email earlier.
Oh, good. I know you have a good-sized crowd there, so I will just enjoy listening to everyone's comments. Thank you.
Okay. I'm glad you're here, David. Lorna, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning to everyone. I think we've kicked off the year, very well. It's been a wonderful teaching, very to the point. Highlighted the concentration needed to fulfill the Eightfold Path on a daily basis. Be mindful of your thoughts. Be mindful of actually what you are thinking. Underline this the speculation of our thoughts that we live in throughout most of the day, unfortunately. Very to the point. A whole lot of Dharma in there.
Yeah.
Just a whole lot of, what it is. And again, you can look at it as very clear and precise, and yet you can get muddled up in it as well. It's not always easy to pinpoint, but that's why we keep coming to class. To be a bit more, get it more clear and more clarified, and to see what we are doing with our minds and how we get caught up in fabrications and stuff. That's why we keep coming. I keep coming.
Yeah.
And it's a brilliant teaching.
It really is. Thank you. Yeah, it has to be seen in the right context. It really doesn't make any sense. It's about 5 minutes to 10. Does anybody have to leave? And I'll ask you to give us your questions or your comments now. Good. You can all stay for another 2 hours. Great. Anthony, good. Good to see you. It won't be 2 hours.
See you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hope everyone has a great 2019. Better than 2018.
Yeah.
This sounded so inspirational. I was thinking, like, if everyone could have this knowledge and ability to catch themselves in a fabrication and not go down that road, the world would be such a great place.
Yeah.
And it started me thinking, like, do you have any? We all come across people who are operating in that mode all the time. Whether it's issues with work or other people. And I thought, well, in the battleground of life, how do we as citizens of the world help people see the fabrications? Because I don't know of a practical way. You can't tell them they're fabricating, it'll just backfire on you. You can't lead them to Buddhism. What could we do to help other people awaken?
It really is a great question. The only thing I do know is this. I don't think I haven't come across any other way of recognizing your own wrong views or fabricated views in any other system. That doesn't mean that people haven't spontaneously developed it, but I haven't seen it. So teacher training, I'm going to send out the email tomorrow announcing teacher training. I think that's the best. Honestly, I think that's the best way. Not necessarily to start a center, but to really understand how to teach others.
But the thing is that, like, people that are not don't know that they don't know.
Yeah, that's that's all included in the first noble truth. Ignorance, ongoing ignorance in the world, is part of dukkha, and it's a recognized. But the Buddha never set himself up as a savior, and he never hoped to teach a salvific religion because he knew the futility of it. So again, and that's even part of I'm not saying you're doing this, but that's part of a speculative view that there should be something that is salvific, because that is completely speculative, isn't it? Whether it's true or not, we can't experience it, so it's speculative. How many people agree in it? So the Buddha knew that the problem wasn't a lack of an effective savior in the world. He knew that the problem was ignorance. So that's what he set out to teach, was how to anybody that was interested to learn and recognize and abandon their own ignorance of the way things truly are. And that was all he ever concerned himself with. I think it's the most important thing that we can concern ourselves with, but not everybody agrees. The people who come here do, obviously. What could be more important than to develop this understanding?
Yeah.
I've sent my books to the last 2 presidents, and nobody's gotten back to me yet. So. But you might as well try. But yeah, it's a concern that grows out of compassion. How can I was sitting there, and I may give this speech. I'm trying to figure out how to do it and not be too dramatic. But all of us know that. I mean, this world is in, and it's not any different than it was 2,600 years ago. But it's a brutal place, isn't it? There's a lot of violence and just awful things that are rooted in ignorance. And what can we do? I think the only thing we can do is to develop that. The only thing I can do is to develop the Dhamma. And so at least not contribute to it anymore. You know, that I really believe that. So I understand where your question's coming from, great compassion, but I don't think there's any way to save the world except one at a time. In other words, there's not an idea, you know, there's not the notion, why don't we all get along? That's a great notion, isn't it? It doesn't work. Why? Because we're ignorant of how to do that. We don't know how to get along.
Yeah. Maybe by being good role models, people will say, I want some of that.
Yeah,
How
imagine.
do I get that?
Imagine if we had more of that, and I'm not just talking about one person, in higher places and just our own government, but worldwide. People that were of good behavior, of practice right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That alone would change the world. You know, but okay, we're getting a little off track. Thank you. Eva, so good to see you. It's been a couple months. We've missed you.
Thank you. It's always wonderful to be here with everyone and grateful house, yes. It's so confusing and yet there's clarity there and it's exciting to me that I think I can see it and I think, as you've said, that really all we can do is just be gentle with ourselves and hope that others around us can see the gentleness, the transformation that I see in myself, which I hope that, let's say, my husband might notice is amazing and so tiny. It's really tiny, but it's so big to me because I tried and I tried and I tried and I couldn't, and now I'm doing this, meditating and trying to stay in the present moment and being mindful and all those things that confuse me, but I can actually see that little change would not have been there otherwise. Without a doubt. So thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you're back. And I just thinking back to when you first started coming over, we were in Riegelsville, and the change in you is remarkable. You know, and it's no big deal either. You know, it's the same Eva, but with a calm and peaceful, a calm mind. It's able to hold refined mindfulness, and it's remarkable. It's worth the price of admission, isn't it? Glad you're here, Becky. Good to see you.
Really nice to be here, John. I really enjoyed listening to the Sutta. It's always it takes so much thinking and to try to internalize just a few of the thoughts in that sutta, because there was so much, and yet it was so all-encompassing of what the Buddha is teaching or did teach, and what we are trying to make part of our lives. And it's really good to come and hear it and think about it while you're hearing it and start to internalize it, because it's a lot. And if you can just get a little bit more each time, then you can start to bring it into your daily life more and more, and have those little small but things that you do that you recognize you are doing because you have learned this and because you have been exposed. So it's really definitely worth the price of admission. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yeah,
Nice to be here.
I'm so glad you're here. There is a lot, but it's all encapsulated in those Four Noble Truths, and that's really all that we need to know. Is we're developing this understanding. For some, it's quicker than others. Kandana got it the first teaching he ever got from the Buddha. Most of us takes a period of time, but not all that much, is it? You know, I mean, we're talking about even all of us have developed a remarkable foundation and understanding of what this is to such an extent that we all talk about realizing the benefits of this. And as the Buddha describes, what are the benefits of it ultimately? A mind resting in equanimity, a mind that's is calm and at peace no matter what's occurring in the world. Judy, good to see you.
Good to be here. Yeah, mind resting in calmness, except a lot of times I remind myself it's okay to be accepting of your less than peaceful mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which happens, which still happens a lot. So, but yeah, it's being here has just been so helpful to me, and it continues to be. So I just want to thank you again. It's great and great teaching today. That's all.
Glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jen, good to see you.
Good to see you. I like how in the sutta he kind of walks you through the 5 clinging aggregates.
Yeah.
And I could start really seeing how there's this accumulation, this like logarithmic accumulation of compost, mental compost. One single phenomenon comes through your form and I make over it. That one single phenomenon can lead to hundreds of feelings, that, hundreds of perceptions, hundreds of mental fabrications, just on that one phenomenon. And how many phenomena come through in an instant are formed. If we're not guarded, it's so quick to get inundated.
Yeah. In that moment, we've given birth to another entire cosmological view of ourselves.
Right.
And it's all fabricated.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. But yeah, that's what I was thinking about. And then also what I liked about the sutta was that by walking you through that, you also are able to see that at any point you can interrupt the process. You can interrupt it at any one of those spots. And, if you can recognize that you're fabricating on one little thing, then it brings you immediately back to the present moment. And then you can work foundation of mindfulness or whatever it is that wherever you cling onto the Eightfold Path. Sorry to use that word.
That's the right use of it.
That can kind of set you straight. So that's it.
That's great. It's I think it's one of the most useful teachings on 5 clinging aggregates, and it relates directly to dependent origination. What you just said, if you can recognize and abandon fabrication, you are now at the point of understanding your own ignorance. Ignorance as a requisite condition comes fabrications. You're right. And once you do that, once you can recognize and abandon all fabricated views, you're no longer stuck in ignorance. That chain of dependencies just simply falls apart. Thank you. Lisa, good to see you.
Great to be here. It's just, the space, and we're kind of close, and all these people, it's just really wonderful. Yeah, it's great. Well, I've had so many thoughts, reactions to things that you said and what everybody said, and so my mind is just all over the place. I guess one thing is that what they say is, changing this, the way to start changing the world is to go back to yourself. We can only change ourselves. That's what we're trying to do. I'm not trying to change anyone else. If it's in conversation, I may say that I'm going to a Sangha and learning about Buddhism and things like that. And if someone wants to ask me any more about it, that's fine. And if they have no idea what it's all about, that's okay too. It's just something that I'm doing for myself, but that sounds selfish, but it's not.
This is realistic.
Right. Last week, the week before, whenever I was here, someone here was talking about an onion layers.
Mm.
And that I remember that, and I was thinking about it when I was reading the Sutta, which there's a whole lot to it. But the thing about things that are complicated and simple is that it's simple and complicated at the same time.
Yeah.
But there's something to do with natural human mentality, which is it's cause and effect thing. We do things and then something happens. So a lot of it is, oh, well, these plants are growing where there were cows in the field and they really did a lot better. So people learn by association. But then there's also the wrong view of that, which is if I do all these things, then I'm gonna. But there's reality in cause and effect. I don't know. I'm sure I'm not explaining it right.
No, you are.
But the religion, okay.
Yep.
Oh, well, if we sacrifice enough animals, if we, we just happen to be doing this and it's not working out. So
Yep.
let's keep doing that, and
Yep.
then the sun will come out. So.
And because you believe it, it's true, even though it has no basis in reality.
Right.
I can interrupt you.
But there's cause and effect, which is true and right, and then there's
Yeah.
also cause and effect, which has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah.
There's something else I want to ask them. Oh, so I mean, how many groups are there that are practicing what someone referred to as fundamental Buddhism? There's so much.
I mean this, only what the Buddha taught?
Yeah, there are so many other kinds of Buddha, Zen and Tibetan and just like so many different kinds, and you've been through it all. You've learned a lot about it, but how much of this is there?
I mean, how many different groups are there like this, or different teachers?
Just teaching.
There's one. I mean, honestly, as far as I know, there was a guy who taught this way, and I'm not going to give his name, and I'll tell you why I won't give his name, because he wasn't completely stable in his thinking, and he was honestly, I don't. Some people might even know who I'm talking about now. He got into some really speculative things but outside of Buddhism. But other than that, he taught mostly a pure Dhamma. I honestly haven't come across anybody. There's some people that are close. Some of the Theravadan teachers teach something that is fairly close to what the Buddha taught, but almost always heavily influenced by a third book called the Abhidhamma, which is a very speculative, suppositional book. So when you incorporate that into the suttas, something the Buddha never taught anything in the Abhidhamma. When that's part of your views, you can't help but have it diminish what the Buddha taught, and that's unfortunately the case. So when the Buddha in the Anapanasati Sutta, which is one of the most misapplied teachings of all time, it's usually taught as a meditation instruction when it has nothing to do with it. In the beginning of that sutta, now think about this, during the Buddha's time, he started that sutta by showing off, I think it was 21 or 22 awakened monks and nuns, actually it was only monks at that time, and saying this group is rare in the world. Even during the Buddha's time, a well-focused Sangha was something that was rare in the world. So it's not surprising that it's still rare in the world. And it's because of these things that the need to find some way of continuing to establish yourself, even within a Buddhist practice, to continue self-referential views, that all of these other practices have developed. There's I don't know if you come across it on my website, there's a article called Modern Buddhism, A Thicket of Views, that in relation, and the article on the Pali Canon explains how this happened and why it happened. And it really is for the compulsive need to establish a religion that allows for continued eye making. And that's really, you mentioned something else too, the cause and effect. In many of the Buddha's teachings on dependent origination, they start out this way. When this, the Buddha's words, when this is, that is. And many, including the Abhidhamma, but most modern interpretations stop there and use that to create a doctrine of interdependence or interconnectedness or interbeing, saying that, well, if this is, that is. If I am that, if that tree is, then I am, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This interconnected clinging view. And they never go past that, where the Buddha says, if this is, that is. If ignorance is here, fabrications are here. That's the cause and effect that we need to understand. If I am having a disappointing moment in this life, if I'm suffering or agitated for any reason or overexcited, I know where it's coming from. It's coming from a fabrication rooted in ignorance. If this is present, if conflict is present, then that is, ignorance is present. That's the teaching as the Buddha teaches, cause and effect. And of course, there's other types of causes and effect, but that's the primary foundational teaching. That's what the Buddha awakened to. If ignorance is present, suffering will follow. If this is, that is. Thank you for bringing that up. Very perceptive. Kevin, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you too, John. Thank you for teaching the sutta. And really, I just have to, having this Sangha. Thank you for bringing us back to the original teaching of the Buddha. And we all hope that we can continue to deepen our concentration through meditation and the Eightfold Path to integrate all this.
It is remarkable. Thank you for your kind words. And I don't even have the words to describe how I feel about being in this position and being able to do this, and having found these teachings. Not that they're completely hidden, but like Lisa was saying, you talk about if you have an interest in Buddhism, you're not likely going to find it that quickly. I didn't for many, many years. So it's the most significant thing in my lifetime. And then to be in this position to teach it and have people that want to hear it, it wouldn't be much fun sitting here by myself. I might try it, but honestly, it's not lost on me that there's nothing that says there has to be people that are still interested in the Buddha's teaching, but there are. So thank you. And it's not just us. There's a good handful of people online that are gaining the benefit of what we're doing here, and through your support, really, it is spreading. It's not just right here in Frenchtown. So thank you, Mary. Good to see you this morning.
Good to be back. It's just so loaded with stuff, and right now I'm mired in thick of dukkha, and I'm listening to this calms my mind and brings me to realize that there is a way out.
Yeah.
And I need to just stick with it.
Yeah. You said that there's magic words. All we have to do is stick with it. Over time, there's going to be periods where it just doesn't feel like anything's happening. A lot of times it's like a plateau where we're integrating what we've learned so far. And it feels like nothing else is going on. It's bland, it's boring, there's no distraction there. And so we feel like it's just not working. But right effort tells us just keep going. Just keep doing it. The benefits are there. Jay, good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Good morning to everybody. And we covered so many different concepts in the course of this meeting that I can't really focus on any one thing or add to it in particular. So I'm not going to try. The only thing I will go back to is I always like Voltaire's book Candide, where he goes all over and has all these misadventures, and in the end, his wisdom or the moral of it is, you take care of your own garden and everything else will be all right. Don't go over to, all these other countries and try and find this and do that and this and what, take care of your own garden out back and everything else will come right. That's all you can do is make your part of the world as correct as you can.
Yeah. That is it. That's so profound. That's what this sutta points directly to that. Get your head out of the past, get it out of the future, and deal with what's occurring right now in the right framework. Thank you, Kathy. Welcome to our Sangha. This is a lot. It's taken out of, well, it's not taken out of context. It is out of context that you haven't established the context yet. But I hope it wasn't too overwhelming, and I hope you continue to join us there. How was your class today in your meditation?
Actually, I really enjoyed it. A lot of when I read things like that, I have to say a lot of it's a drive-by. I don't have a clue what they're talking about. But listening to you, I can understand it.
Good.
I think that you're a very good teacher, and I actually really enjoyed today's lesson.
Thank you. Yes, I hope you do continue. On the website, becoming-buddha.com, there's a page that's linked at the top for new visitors. If you're interested, that's a good place to get started. It'll point you in the direction of certain other teachings that will begin to establish a foundation and a context for what we teach here. Also on the top of that homepage is guided meditations, and there's recordings from 5 to 45-minute meditations, just like we did here this morning. And you could use that to start this meditation practice if you wanted to. Depending on how long you've been meditating, if you've been meditating for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that's fine. If you've been meditating for shorter periods, I would say start there, or maybe even go back to 5 minutes. If you want to change your practice into this, start with short periods of time and then gradually add some time. But like I always said, I think Becky mentioned it, the kind of the key to all this is to be very gentle with yourself. And don't judge yourself harshly, don't judge the Dhamma harshly. But if you continue, pretty quickly you'll realize the benefits of it, and it'll make a little bit more sense. And again, welcome to our Sangha. I hope you continue to join us. A few quick, and you can also sign up for the newsletter that I send out on Mondays and Thursdays, just describing the classes that week with a link to the articles that I'll be referring to. I'm going to send out the announcement for teacher training probably tomorrow. It'll just describe the requirements, and if you're going to join us, there's an email form at the bottom to just say that you agree to the requirements, and I hope many of you do. Whether you intend to actually teach the Dhamma, that's not. I hope that you do that too, but you'll really get another way of looking at the Dhamma, and I think you'd all find it beneficial whether you teach or not. And the Truth of Happiness, one of my books is called The Truth of Happiness, and it's a 10-week study of the foundational teachings of the Buddha. That's going to begin again next Saturday and Tuesday. The same class will be on Saturdays and Tuesdays. And I'll announce that and orient you to that on Monday's email, I think. So, wow. Yes.
That'll go for about 12 weeks, John.
Yeah, the book is written as 10 weeks, but it's typically, we get into some other things. It's typically 12 weeks or so.
14.
Yeah, maybe 14. Well, yeah. Even there's another, I'm going to change slightly the teachings on anicca, anatta, and dukkha, both in the book. I won't have it published by then. But I'm going to introduce one or two different suttas too, but we'll get to that. But yeah, that's coming up. Let's finish as we always do with Metta, the Buddha's words on Metta. So again, find your relaxed meditation posture and take a moment to become mindful of your in-breath and your out-breath. And these are the Buddha's words on Metta from the Khajjaniya Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class this morning. Peace. Thank you, Alan. We'll see you next week. Yeah, just a note, 10:25, I do try to end these classes a little quicker than this, but as you know, this